Hello. So today we're talking about a woman who gives academia and the humanities a really bad name. Her name is Aubrey, and she's apparently getting a PhD in body image studies. Let's go.
Is being fat bad for you? I want to be clear, I'm never going to make the argument that having more body fat is a net positive for your physical health. What I do suggest is that the relation between body fat and health is a little bit more complex than this one-to-one relation it normally gets painted as. For example, if we knew that people with red hair had worse health outcomes than people with other hair colors, we wouldn't just tell people to dye their hair. We'd ask, well, what's going on with people with red hair? And the thing with fatness is that we know that people are treated differently when they live in larger bodies, usually in a negative way, which causes stress, which has negative health outcomes. Fat people are also more likely to be poor, which has negative health outcomes. Many fat people are also less inclined to go to see health practitioners because of the mistreatment that most fat people get at doctors' offices. So it's my belief that telling people to just lose weight is an oversimplification of a greater problem.
She's making the whole it's not being fat that's unhealthy, it's how fat people are treated that makes them unhealthy. But comparing it to hair color? She said if research found that people with red hair were dying earlier, they would look at how society treats people with red hair and not the red hair itself. But no. Unless redheads were dying on the street, hate crime style, researchers would almost certainly look at some sort of genetic component to why red hair could be shortening the lives of redheads. And if it is a genetic problem that could be caused by dyeing their hair, doctors would recommend it. If I had a disease that was ruining my quality of life and a doctor said it could be fixed by consistently dyeing my hair, I'd be like, fantastic, great, thank you. And it's just like if you were overweight and your doctor tells you your joint problems might go away if you lose weight. It's the simplest solution, and it gets to the root of the problem. And none of this makes sense anyway, because there's more than enough scientific evidence to show that being overweight leads to health problems, no matter how society treats fat people. We know this.
Alright, I'm gonna say something controversial, but I think it needs to be said. Low-rise jeans becoming popular again is fat-phobic.
I really thought she was going to say low-rise jeans look terrible on everyone, which I agree with, but nope. She took a completely different route.
And I already know. Somebody is gonna be like, no, Abby, low-rise jeans are not fat-phobic. Anybody can wear low-rise jeans. That's what you sound like. That's what you sound like if you say that. Because truthfully, I know that I could go out and wear low-rise jeans right now. But the thing is that if you think that society would find that acceptable or that I would feel comfortable doing so, I need you to get back in your little car and drive it to the circus. Because you're a clown. And I know I'm right, because I follow all the little plus-size fashion girlies, and none of them are rocking the low-rise jeans. Because we know! And obviously I'm not saying that no one can wear low-rise jeans. If you want to wear low-rise jeans, wear low-rise jeans. But you can't deny that they've become popularized again because of one specific body type that is incredibly thin. So prove me wrong.
A clothing item cannot be fat-phobic. It just can't. Just because you don't see fat people wearing low-rise jeans doesn't mean that the jeans or the trend is fat-phobic. It could be, and this is my opinion, because low-rise jeans look bad on everyone regardless of size. But there are a bunch of clothes that fat women have been frowned upon for wearing for a long time, like crop tops and bikinis, but those garments or the trends of wearing them aren't fat-phobic. She even made this video about bikinis.
Being in the little bubble that I'm in, I sort of thought that the marketing around, having a bikini body for the summer had started to die off, but it still exists. And there's also a new form of it where, especially on TikTok, I see people talking about getting, a snatched waist, and it's just it's still bad. If you want to change your body, that is completely your choice and you have the autonomy to do so. I will never tell you not to do something. But I really encourage you to think of your motivations about why you want to, look snatched for the summer.
So she understands that bikini bodies don't exist and people can wear whatever clothing items they want, even if it may not be considered socially acceptable by some people. But she still thinks that low-rise jeans and the trend of wearing them is fat phobic because some people may see it as socially unacceptable for fat people to wear them. Girl, wear the jeans if you want to wear the jeans. Nobody's stopping you. Be that trailblazer that wears low-rise jeans as a fat person. You got this.
As a body image researcher, I think that there's this constant pressure to answer the question of, do I think people should consciously change their appearance? So do I think people should get plastic surgery or shave their legs or consciously lose weight? And my answer or non-answer to this is that I think that you should do whatever it is that makes you happy. What I advocate for is not that no one should ever consciously lose weight or get plastic surgery. All I advocate for is that we think more critically about why it is that we want to change our appearance. For instance, if you want to lose weight because you think you're unattractive and no one will love you unless you lose weight, then your weight isn't really the problem. And the thing is that losing weight won't actually make you love yourself. But I do think that there are people who have valid reasons to change their appearance in some way, right? Like, you can dye your hair and it doesn't mean that you hate how your hair looks. You just want to do something different. I highly discourage people from posting before and after photos, whether it's in the domain of weight loss, weight gain, or if they're trying to make a statement about how their body did or didn't change in some way. When you post before and after pictures of weight loss, that can be incredibly troubling for people who suffer from eating disorders or other kinds of body dysmorphic issues. It also implies that you were less of a worthy person in your before photo, which is incredibly insulting to people who look like your before photo. On the body positive side of things, when people post before and after pictures of how they looked when they had an eating disorder versus when they gained weight, you're doing the exact same thing. All around, it isn't a good look, so stop doing it. If your intent is just to show that you're happier now, just show that you're happier now.
How can you believe in bodily autonomy, but also believe that showing any changes or progress you've made is a bad look? This woman is apparently a body image researcher, and she makes a bunch of videos about how people should love their bodies and appreciate their bodies at whatever size, yada, yada, yada. That's fine. I don't really care about that. But then to go on and say that before and after pictures are bad because it could be disparaging to other bodies is just a level of insecure that I hope to never be. Just because someone feels like they've changed for the better, that doesn't mean they hated their former body or former self. And for some people, maybe it does. Maybe they did hate their former self, but people are allowed to feel how they want about their body. There are countless people who have lost weight, gained weight, or had cosmetic surgery, and they've said they didn't like their before body. And that's okay. Disliking a physical form of myself or an era of my life doesn't mean that I hate everyone who is similar to me during that time. If I used to be homeless and I showed a before and after picture of the car I lived in when I was homeless next to the 2-bedroom apartment I live in now with a caption talking about the progress I made to get here, it would be ridiculous to be like, wow, way to disparage homeless people. I can't believe you would poverty shame by showing pictures like that. Some people are still homeless right now, you know. Because, yeah, that makes sense. You can't believe in bodily autonomy and believe that progress photos of any kind are wrong. And this mentality that you're allowed to change your body, but you're just not allowed to show it, or it hurts me, is a terrible mentality to have.
What is the obesity paradox, and why don't I support it? The obesity paradox is a medical hypothesis that supposes that being fat is actually protective and that it increases survival for certain groups, such as the elderly. There are 3 issues that I have with the obesity paradox. The first is that studies testing this hypothesis almost always use BMI as a measure of weight, which is an incredibly problematic measure. The second is that this may be a reverse correlation caused by illness-induced weight loss. People who are very ill tend to lose weight. So it might not be low weight that is causing death and therefore making heavier weight seem protective, but rather imminent death causing low weight. Finally, the obesity paradox does not exist because people can be healthy at any size. If you accept that there's no such thing as an ideal weight and that everyone's ideal weight probably changes over the course of time in their lived experience, there's no paradox to explain.
I almost respect her dedication to the ignorance. Like, almost. Not there, but almost. Like, most fat activists will use the obesity paradox to suggest that all the readily available data that shows obesity is unhealthy might be wrong. But she went a different route and just said, all the data is wrong to begin with, and there's never been any comprehensive evidence that obesity is unhealthy. The obesity paradox doesn't need to be researched because obesity research is bullshit to begin with. I'm dumbfounded by her ability to understand why bringing up the obesity paradox to say that obesity isn't unhealthy is logically incorrect, but then to spin that into a reason that obesity isn't unhealthy at all. The mental gymnastics mixed with the tiny bit of reason, coupled with the complete science denialism, is a sight to behold, quite honestly.
Sometimes I will get called a science denier because I question science. This is not true. Whenever I talk about body size and health, people get very impassioned and very angry. They'll say, isn't it common knowledge that people with more body fat percentage have a greater risk of heart attacks or higher mortality or whatever? And I'll say, hey, some of the science here is a little bit questionable. And then almost always they will send me the first article that comes up when you Google body fat and heart attacks or whatever. Then I will question the science and I will say, well, here are some of the issues with how these researchers conducted these experiments. And then they will call me a science denier. Then I will send them an article that says that people in the overweight BMI category have a lower mortality rate than people in the lower weight categories. To which they're like, well, no, obviously there's a lot of complexities with science. If you're only willing to acknowledge complexities when it refutes your points and then thinks science is irrefutable when it confirms your bias, that's a problem.
So what I think she does is she goes through all the scientific studies that she finds or is sent that have to do with the health risks of obesity, and she picks out a part of the research that is questionable and then discards the entire paper based on that flaw. But first of all, every research paper has flaws. I used to be in a class that we had to read research papers and do write-ups on them, and part of the write-up was that we had to write down at least 2 criticisms of each paper based on things like methodology, the tools used, the topics that were or were not addressed, etc. That's part of the reason why a lot of research will expand on other research, because one paper may not have touched on this corner case, or the sample size may have been too small. So throwing out an entire research paper, and especially multiple research papers on the same topic due to a small criticism you may have, doesn't work with what the idea of scientific research is at all. And second, throwing out an entire scientific field due to these small criticisms is exactly how science denialism works. Very few science deniers call themselves science deniers. They do exactly what this woman does and take a small piece of scientific research that is questionable or they've been told is questionable and use that as justification to dismiss the entire paper or the entire subject. Anti-vaxxers will look at the mountain of evidence behind vaccines and they will find the tiniest reason to discard every single study to justify their own beliefs. And I think the reason she justifies throwing out any obesity article that she doesn't like is because a lot of them use the BMI, and she says the BMI is flawed, so she just throws out the entire article. But her taking every scientific study that uses the BMI and using that as a reason to ignore it is the same type of behavior as every other scientific denialism group. The difference between being critical of science and being a science denier is being able to understand and articulate the weaknesses and strengths of scientific research, and a willingness to expand on the research gaps that currently exist. A science denier sees any flaws in research and discards all the research because of those flaws. So if you are throwing out all obesity research because you dislike one of the tools it uses, that isn't being critical of science, it's science denialism. As I said, you can have criticisms of the tools used in a research paper, but that doesn't mean that the paper itself isn't legitimate. It's just ignoring science to justify your own beliefs.
But at the end of the day, I guess I just want to make a video where I say that if my content ever ends up on any kind of cringe subreddit or anything, that's fine. Because if I'm called cringe because I say that people should be treated fairly regardless of their appearance and regardless of whether or not you personally find them attractive, that's fine. I don't know. I guess if you're seeing this on some cringe website, just know that while you're laughing at me from your pedestal, I'm doing fine.
Okay, she's doing fine, everyone. So that's good. But I want it on the record that you are not in this video because you're saying that people deserve to be treated with respect. But because of the science denialism masked with academic jargon, along with the blatant insecurity masked as women empowerment and bodily autonomy, and the horrible takes. Low-rise jeans are fatphobic? Yeah, that's the cringy part. It's not the advocating for basic respect part.
What does obesity mean? To answer this question, let's go all the way back to classical antiquity, ancient Greece and Rome. In a time of relative prosperity, there was a lot of anxiety about what abundance means. Moderation and balance became virtues, and any sign of an excess was a flaw that needed to be corrected. When it came to eating, overindulgence was seen as a moral failing. Food is meant to be fuel, not pleasure. So, fatness became a symbol for moral corruption, which leads to the Latin word obesus, which means having eaten until fat. In the grand scheme of things, demonizing fatness is an anomaly that has really been limited to only a few time periods. But as we know, history is told through the eye of the victors.
This TikTok is really interesting to me. First of all, obesity as a moral failing is not isolated to specific time periods. It has been considered morally questionable in a lot of societies throughout human history, and it has never been seen as virtuous in any that I know of. It has been seen as desirable because you're usually wealthy to become obese, but it's never been seen as virtuous, as far as I know. And she mentioned moderation and balance being considered virtues. That's true, and it's also true in most societies. And it's especially true when it comes to resources that people need to survive. Moderation and balance are considered virtues because they are the opposite of greed. And pretty much all religions, which are the moral compass that most people use to guide their life, look down on greed. And back in ancient times, or medieval times, food could be considered much more similar to money in today's day and age. It's something that people need to survive, and it's very scarce for a lot of people. Starvation was a much bigger problem back then, so consuming enough food that you were getting fat while others starved was considered a moral failing in the same way that most, if not all religious texts, refer to wealth as the antithesis of holiness or morality. That's why obesity was considered morally questionable, because the hoarding of resources that other people need to survive and struggle to get has always been seen as a lack of virtue. It's just that we live in a day and age where starvation and access to food is significantly less of a problem than it was back then.
There was a headline that said, "The prevalence of obesity continues to grow," and it cited a recent article. To the best of my ability, I'm going to summarize for you what the researchers actually found. In a sample of over 13,000 people aged 36 to 79, they asked them, what do you weigh right now, and what did you weigh 10 years ago? The average person reported that they weighed 10 pounds more now than they did 10 years ago. Everyone in the sample said that they weighed more now than they did 10 years ago. About half said that that was 5% of their body weight, a third said that it was 10% of their body weight, and then a fifth said that it was 20% of their body weight. The researchers didn't collect anything about weight categorization, which is a problematic measure in general, but would be helpful here. So we don't know if these people are gaining weight going from normal weight to overweight, or if they're already overweight, or anything like that.
So there was a study that came out that looked at weight gain over the span of 10 years based on self-reported numbers. The study broke down demographics based on age, race, gender, etc. But she says the study is problematic because it didn't use the BMI or a similar metric, even though she was just saying that a lot of scientific research about obesity is bad because it uses the BMI. But when a study comes out looking at weight and it doesn't include the BMI, then it's still not good. But why though? She never explained why. And it seems like even the people in her comments don't know what she's talking about, because the top comment on this video says, self-reported data is notoriously bad. And her response is, self-reported weight is usually okay, but I think without understanding what it means in this context is problematic. She's like, my research is body image, so it's pretty much all self-reported data, like pretty much all of it. So no, we can't say that the self-reported part of this study is the problem. The problem is that we don't know what the science means. What do you mean? What does it mean? It means people are gaining weight and some demographics more than others. That was the thing. That was the whole thing. I can't process how she justifies a study being bad for using the BMI and also bad for not using it. And what's even more confusing is that she went out of her way to point out a study that doesn't use the BMI and then criticize it for no real reason. I don't get it. This woman is the reason that the humanities and research in the humanities, particularly like gender studies and race studies and sexuality studies, all get such a bad rep. It all lends to the worst stereotypes about research in the humanities. And it's sad. That's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.